Do those usual vocal anatomy books just drain the colour from your life and make you hit a grey wall? Yes, me too. Don't worry, Eimear McCarthy Luddy from Vocology Ireland has got our backs with her hashtag Anatomonday vocal anatomy colouring book. In this episode, Eimear tells us how she got to grips with vocal anatomy, and she shares tips on how we can do the same. She gives us a little insight into her colouring book to see what we might expect, and she talks us through the process from Kickstarter to publication. So let's welcome Eimear McCarthy Luddy.
Eimear, whenever you get together with your family or your friends, what's it like when games like Pictionary get pulled out from the cupboard? Do people just rush to have you on their team? Do you start to get stressed? What happens?
Sorry, I'm fully cackling because all I can think about is somebody that knows me is going to watch this and listen to this podcast and be like, absolutely not. I am the last pick. I would always be the last pick if it involves drawing anything, which is rather bizarre news from people who are like, Eimear, you've created a colouring book. What do you mean you can't draw? I swear, because I draw everything digitally, digital drawing has really changed my life. But if you asked me to put pen to paper and I was trying to draw you a larynx, let me tell you, she'd be wonky. She might not look like a larynx at all. But I'm also good crack on a quiz team, so that's something I get away with being really bad at drawing then.
Oh, well, that's okay then. We'll just have to have you on the pub quizzes. But I mean, I can't draw a stick person. But I do kind of feel if you are shit at drawing, Pictionary is the game for you. It's not fun if you're really good.
Well, I'm definitely not really good at it. It is a running joke now with friends of mine. They're like, I can't believe that you created this book. I mean, who knew that you were able to draw? I'm like, I didn't. And literally, I was doing it for learning reasons and not for aesthetic reasons initially. And then it just kind of got out of control and now it's this.
Wow. So you didn't do art or anything at school?
Nah, absolutely not.
I really love that story. Well, we're going to get more into the book and how it was created a little bit later, but I have to ask you, when you first started your teaching journey, what was it that challenged you when it came to vocal anatomy, and why do you think that this is something that you've kind of focused on? You've done your Anatomondays hashtag on Instagram.
Probably the reason that I ended up going down this road is earlier on in my teaching years and my learning years as a singer, they didn't really talk about anatomy at all. And I know this isn't everyone's experience now, and it's really changed over the last, 5 to 20 years, depending on which country you're from. But here, no one showed me, a picture of a larynx, and I always had a lot of questions, which makes you an interesting and often challenging student, I imagine. It's my favorite type of student is the ones that has endless questions, but I would ask and they wouldn't always have the answer, and I would go searching, and in the process of searching, I would come across traditional anatomy resources, which let's just say are really boring. If we're being honest about it, you pick up a super sciencey, super heavy textbook about anatomy and I fall asleep reading it because it's really boring and inaccessible. I just didn't really understand it. So anything, when you're saying which is the thing that challenged you, all of it, because I was just so curious. I was so eager to know how the engine works and not just drive the car. Like I wanted to know what happens in there? And I kept asking the questions. And then no matter how hard I tried to understand it, I just couldn't. And then you'd get like visual imagery explanations from teachers. And I started taking anatomy courses and seeking help that way instead. And that made more sense because there was a human behind it explaining it. But it only really started to make sense when it was a human who was also a singer. Because they're so creative and fun and they're used to describing things from multiple viewpoints. And when you don't initially get something, I think one of the best things about singing teachers is they're used to somebody not immediately clicking with an idea. So their response isn't, but why don't you understand it? Their response is, okay, let's play and go at it a different way. How about this? And once I realized you can apply that method of teaching singing to something like anatomy, you can also make it more fun.
When it comes to your actual teaching then, how have you found that anatomy has played a role? Do you talk about the different landmarks, or is it there for you to diagnose and understand what's happening in the person in front of you?
I think it really varies from student to student. So some people just prefer not really talking about it and not knowing a lot behind the why of, how things work. And I like to go based on what's going to work best for the person who's in front of me. So if I have someone who wants to epically nerd out about anatomy, I will do that. But if I have someone who doesn't, I'll get there a different way. So I might initially present them with the idea of why. So when we're doing a particular exercise, I might give them this is why, because this is what we're looking to achieve. Cool. And then we move on. And someone else might say, why? But tell me more about this. And let's talk about this. But like, okay, cool. But at the end of the day, singing is a motor skill. And we know the more that we play and sing and explore in a lesson, the better we're going to learn, rather than if we just talk. So I think the honest answer would be, at the beginning of my teaching, so when I first started learning about all this stuff, and any voice coach who's listening to this has probably done this at some point, where you do a course and then you come back from the course and you're so excited because you just learned this cool new thing. And then let's say you do a course on the tongue and how the tongue works. And then you come back and every single student that whole week gets lessons on tongue, mobility, and let's try this. And it's just like the best thing that ever happened. But really it's because you just did the course. I think that was me with anatomy, that when I first started delving into it, it was all I thought about all the time. And then I realized, actually, it's not that interesting to everyone. And it's not that necessary to be talking about it as much as you were. So I reflected and learned and gave myself an output. Or an outlet for that kind of thought. And that's how the Instagram hashtag kind of started, was I thought, I'll do this sort of once a week to deepen my own knowledge and not to bore my students with it. And instead bore Instagram with it, which turned out to be a really good idea. So that's how that started. Yeah.
You're totally right about, clinging on to things that you're learning at that particular moment. I think Chris Johnson spoke about it in one of his courses about going through fads, and how everything you hear is a register issue. And then how everything you hear after that is to do with the tongue, because you've read this book about the tongue, or you've watched something with Kerry Ober about the tongue. And it's, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yeah. What are we actually referring to when we talk about anatomy?
That one really makes me stop and think, because what are we referring to? Because technically there's anatomy and physiology, and there's it's quite a black hole to dive into there in that answer. I guess with me, when I talk so passionately and weirdly about this particular subject, it's, the body and how it works and what's in there and what their usual jobs are, and what their other more fun jobs are, and how one thing affects another thing. It's kind of everything at the same time, which is a bit overwhelming. The other is me, how your body works, what's in there, and what it does. Yeah, that would be my basic answer. I guess my more complicated answer is, because I think even the name or even the word anatomy is a bit boring. I'm going to end up saying this. So because my brain is a bit neurospicy in the way that it works, I like to find unusual connections between things in order to keep life interesting. So when I'm presented with something that is linear and sort of goes from point A to point B and is black and white and stuffy, I find ways to make it colourful so that it's easier to remember and to understand. And I think anatomy as a subject can appear a little bit black and white, but when I look at it, I see magic. I think singers, when when you have someone and they're trying to make a new sound that they haven't made before, and you're sort of cueing them through it, guiding them through it, playing, exploring, and then they make this amazing sound and they have this moment and they go, oh my goodness, how do I do that? What was that? And it's just there's such a moment of splendor and joy and wonder. And that's how I feel about anatomy. I think it's fascinating what's happening in there, how it's working. And even when we think we know, we still don't know. So anatomy is sort of magical for me. It's like discerning the science from the magic.
So for teachers out there who are struggling to get a hold of anatomy, they don't really know where to start, what would be your advice other than get Eimear's colouring book?
Oh, goodness. I think for me, starting small and accepting that you're not going to know all of the things straight away was helpful. I also remember someone saying to me that it does take a number of passes around the track before you can actually start holding on to the information. So I think whenever I looked up something, if I looked up something online, I would be faced with one of those pages and they would say, you know, origins and insertions and the long muscle names, and everything was so intimidating that it only started making sense to me once I picked one thing. Like, okay, I'm going to do that. So there was one week where I spent the whole week just picking anatomical terminology. So like, what does it, which is something I haven't included in the book yet, because I couldn't figure out a way yet to make that fun, but bear with, because I have ideas. Things like, what does, you know, anterior and posterior mean? And can you come up with a fun way of remembering that? You know, if posterior means to the back, you know, oh, there's my posterior, what else is on your back? You know, think of a silly way of remembering something and do it that way. And then building blocks of like step by step. I think with singers and singing teachers, start really small. So start with some things that can be really helpful for your students immediately. Like, you know, knowing that the first job of your larynx wasn't actually speech and making sounds, knowing that the main reason that we have a larynx is to keep us alive so that we don't drown, you know, because you have two tubes, you've got your windpipe and then you've got your esophagus, and your larynx is like the junction point between those two that diverts liquids away, because otherwise you would drown. So it's super useful for things like that. And I think as a singer, understanding that your larynx is used to swallowing so often, so many times throughout the day, so it's got that particular motion down. It knows how to do that. It knows how to lift and squeeze. And when we're singing, we're doing something different. So it's bringing awareness to, hey, that thing that you're used to doing, right now we're going to play it and do something else. But if it tries to do that other thing, if it gets confused while we're singing and it tries to like lift and squeeze and put in a lot of effort or pressure or something, let's not demonize that response. Let's say, hey, it's just used to doing something else a lot of the time because anatomy, because isn't that cool? Let's come back into the room and keep playing again, you know, shake it off and let's have another go, and then make it fun and make it silly. And it's just a fun way of bringing in small bits of anatomy without overwhelming someone with a huge thing. So yeah, start small, forgive yourself for not knowing everything straight away, because it's really hard to know all the answers. And I think finding out a few is a great first step, and then keep going. And even the people who are like really good at this stuff still get it wrong. Like there's a lot of names to memorize, and it's not going to make you a better singing teacher to like know really long names of muscles and stuff. It's going to make you sound like you read a lot of books, but it's not going to make you sing better. So forgive yourself, start learning. It's fun.
There's one thing to know names like vocal folds and geniohyoid and sternocleidomastoids, and it's sort of another in my brain to think of directions or positions like inferior or lateral or medial. Is there a hierarchy in terms of what is more important than another to learn as a singing teacher, do you think, in this topic?
In terms of terminology or function, you think?
I think more in terms of terminology.
I think one of the things, this is going to sound a bit silly because it's a silly rhyme I came up with for myself. One of the things that was helpful for me to learn, particularly about muscles, is that being able to dissect the different parts of the muscle can often tell you what direction it's going to move and therefore what function it has. And that isn't always true when it gets into the like intrinsic muscles of the larynx. They have very long names, and even knowing what direction they're going to move is still kind of only step one. But with some of the other muscles, it helps. Like if you're looking at, not sternothyroid. Yeah, sternothyroid. Yes. As I think through this in my head. See, even me, I'm still thinking through this stuff. So something is often named for, this isn't true for every muscle, but let's just say generally, this is a little easy hack that we like to use, is that it will be named for its origin and its insertion. So if it's a sternothyroid, sterno, the sternum, thyroid, the thyroid cartilage, sterno being the origin, thyroid being the insertion. So if that's our little hack, it's named from origin to insertion. Hack number one. Hack number two, the general rule is that our insertion point moves towards the origin point in muscles. And my way of remembering that is that I will often move towards a plate of Oreos. Yes?
I love that.
It works for me. I had someone later on say, oh, Eimear, but you could have just remembered them because it's alphabetical, because I comes before O. And it's like, this is the perfect example of how my brain is neurospicy and a little wacky, because it comes up with, I move towards Oreos, and I'm always going to remember that. Whereas I'm probably not going to remember that something is alphabetical. Like, that makes perfect sense to me, but it's not going to stick. But every time I'm looking at an anatomy book, all I think of is this plate of Oreos, and I think, yes, I move towards them. So, sternothyroid, origin insertion. If I move towards Oreos, that means the thyroid is going to move towards the sternum when that muscle is engaged. So that's the secret hack of like how I often try and figure out what function muscles are going to have, is actually sitting down and looking at what's in the name, what the different bits mean, and then guessing what the movement might be. And that's been the kind of fastest way that I've started adding building blocks together. So yeah, and I think then when you add things like lateral, medial, those kind of things, that's just sort of, it tells you where something is on the map. You know, like if you've got, for singers, we will often hear about the pterygoid muscles, right? Like the ones in the jaw. There's lots of different muscles involved in mastication and chewing, those kind of things. And two of the muscles that we talk about, especially if you've ever been for a vocal massage, they'll talk about the lateral and the medial pterygoids. So what that's telling you essentially is that one of them is lateral. Lateral usually means more towards the edges, and medial means more towards the midline. So all it's telling you is when you're looking at that diagram and someone points and goes, those are two pterygoids, which one is going to be the medial one, the one closer to the midline? So like, it's, it's people just, someone explained this to me before, very sciencey human, was like, yeah, we like to have words for everything because it means you don't have to remember everything, because it gives you all of the details right there. It's a clear recipe, and we're very lazy and we need our recipe. I thought, that's an interesting way of putting it. Okay, so they sound intimidating as words, but they're actually not when you break them down. So yeah, get your plate of Oreos and you'll be grand.
And I have to ask, is it always Oreos for you? Is that your top biscuit?
No, it's weird. It's just that was the first thing that popped into my head when I was trying to come up with a funny way of remembering this for my brain. I'm like, I could have thought, oranges. I love oranges. Orange juice, that would have been great. I thought about all these things afterwards, but it was too late because I had already thought of this image of me just like munching on some Oreos. And then, no, it wouldn't be my go-to biscuit. I love a chocolate hobnob.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Dipped in a nice cup of tea.
Oh, you see, I'm not a dipper.
Not even with a hobnob.
Not with anything.
Oh, without the dip though. And it's also how long do you dip it for? You see, there's a science to that, because if you dip for too long and it's mush, it's going to ruin your day.
And the tea, which is the main focus of the snack, to be fair. So nothing gets dunked in that. It's too precious. Also, when I think of the pterygoids, I think of pterodactyls.
Yes.
So we can think about the pterodactyls, which one is where in position.
Totally agree. Honestly, if the only takeaway that anyone gets from today's episode is, if you just come up with weird ways of remembering things, is that what I've been doing this whole time? Yeah, it works. Have more fun with it. Make it relatable, make it fun, because everything is, if you, look at it the right way or try hard enough, there's always some kind of magic or joy or unusual way to see something that makes it better.
So what is your favourite piece of vocal anatomy that you have studied and to have drawn digitally?
So I probably don't have the same answer to those two bits. So I think my favourite piece of vocal anatomy is probably the arytenoids, which I know everyone says that word differently. So some people say arytenoids, and then some people say arytenoids. I learned all of my anatomical words from books before I went to a lecture. So I was just reading them out in my head, and that's what they sounded like. And then I met people and they said them differently. And I thought, are we supposed to say arytenoids? Because I don't. Anyway, I think they are so fascinating because the larynx itself is so fascinating as just all the different parts of it, all the muscles that are inside of it and outside of it, facilitating its movement intrinsically, extrinsically. Like, it's just nuts. But the arytenoids, they're just freaking superheroes. The way that they move is fascinating. So that's why the second part of your question, is not the same, because drawing the arytenoids has been a bit of a nemesis for me. They're quite difficult to draw. So I'm still working on that, because they make an awful lot more sense in 3D than in 2D, just as parts of anatomy. So like I've tried, free 3D printed files of larynxes and stuff that I've done, and printed out my own ones to kind of see them instead of buying those very expensive anatomical models. I actually have a friend of mine who is the person who did additional illustrations in my book. Rosa Devine is her name. Fabulous human. And she is working on 3D printing a larynx for me at the moment. And I was trying to explain the arytenoids to her last week. It's like, no, but it's not quite right, because, it needs to be a little smushier on this bit and a little concave on this bit, and this has a muscle attached to it. And she's not a singer or a voice nerd. So whenever we explain anatomy things, we always use really wacky words. Like the hyoid bone is kind of Batman, and the thyroid is the shield, and the cricoid is the signet ring, and like we have different words for it when we brainstorm, because she's not in the vocal world at all. It's wonderful. But yeah, so drawing them has not been my favorite thing to draw, but they are probably my favorite bit of vocal anatomy, because they're so interesting with how they move. I think my favorite thing to draw is I really enjoyed drawing the side, like the sagittal of the vocal tract. So the one that's on the cover of the book. I have fun drawing that, because I think that was the first thing that didn't make sense to me in a voice textbook. Because I would look at it and I'd be like, I know what that bit is, I know what that bit is, but I do not understand where the larynx is in this. If I'm being fully honest. So like you'd look at it and you'd be like, I know that the label is pointing to that thing and it says that's the larynx. But like how? Does it make... Because it doesn't look larynxy at all, because it's chopped in half. And the minute that clicked for me years ago when I first started with this, it's like, oh, that's so much less complicated than I thought it was. Is this actually secretly not that complicated and just no one's talking about it? So that was my favorite thing to draw. And it's actually me. So a couple of friends of mine noticed this in the book cover, but like if you look, this has Post-its on it, but if you look, that's me. The same profile.
I can totally tell by your hyoglossus.
Right. Unmistakably, Eimear. Yeah, because I hadn't said it to anyone, and then a friend of mine was like, did you draw yourself and put it on the cover of your book? I was like, yeah. And if you make a book, you should do the same thing, because it's taken a piece of my soul. So now it has me on the cover. There you go.
I love that. This kind of goes on to a question I had about how you discovered mindfulness, which, adult colouring therapy blew up, years ago. My mum's got a stack of them at home. And learning. So what did you discover about that? Is there any science behind doing a mindful task and being able to learn better about something?
Yeah, I think the reason I got into it, again, was sort of similar to how we do stuff, how we naturally teach, or how we evolved to teach people how to sing, is we don't usually get somebody to come in and be like, today we are going to strengthen this particular set of muscles, and we will do it this way, and do this exercise 10 times, and then do exercise 10 times. We don't often do that in the singing world, because it is also about communication and expression and making someone's soul feel something while also learning a complex motor skill. We tend to blend the two. And I think all of my earliest exposure to teaching, so the first people I ever taught, this is by accident, but a number of my first students were all neurodivergent in some way. So like my first student ever was a bit of ADHD, a bit of dyslexia, and then all the rest of my first couple of students were also in that camp. So that was my earliest exposure. And for those students, I found the best results that I would get from them would be by presenting something in a more creative way from multiple angles. So not just giving them one thing and saying, this is what we're doing. We would have multiple directions in and find what works, the path of least resistance, and then go from there. So with anatomy, I was thinking, is there a way that we can do that as well? So instead of being like, here's a diagram, memorize the labels. Instead of doing that, saying, hey, here's a diagram, and it has labels, but let's color it in. So while you're coloring it in and doing the same color per label, because it takes you a while to colour in, you are looking at the page for a long time. You're also moving at the same time, so you're engaging different parts of your brain. You know, how much longer are you looking at that page and enjoying the colouring? How much more likely is it that you're going to remember the thing that was on the page? And then maybe 10 pages later, I have another one that says, hey, this one, but it doesn't have labels. Colour it in again, and then fill in your own labels. And then about 10 pages later, it's, hey, draw your own one. Put your own labels in if you like. So it's repetition, but in a fun way, and involving something else like colouring. So it's not immediately overwhelming, because you don't just have to look at it and memorize something. So it's basically, I'm stealing the singing teacher's handbook of doing things and then applying it to anatomy. And I just kind of was hoping it would work. So I didn't spend a lot of time sitting down and doing research, to be honest, on whether or not this was going to be the most effective way to learn. It was just, if I'm being honest, a hunch that I had, because it's how I wanted to learn. And it was how I was teaching myself. And I don't know, sometimes when you teach yourself to do something a particular way and you try it with a bunch of people and see if it works, it might work for like 8 out of 10 of them. You never know. And the mindfulness stuff was, I feel the same way about the adult colouring books, the ones that everyone was using. I would often buy them, and to be honest, I would often buy them and then colour one page and then forget I had them. So I would put them down. But often when people recommend mindfulness, I haven't historically been great at mindfulness. I'm still working on it, but I'm not great at mindfulness when I sit there and don't do anything, because I get quite fidgety. So I prefer mindfulness that involves movement. So like if somebody's giving me a mindfulness exercise and I'm walking at the same time, or cycling at the same time, or colouring, I find that easier to get in sync with than just sit there and be still. Eimear is, as you may have noticed by now, not quite in my like personality wheelhouse. I just can't take it. I get antsy. That was why. And I also know from singers out there how when you're in rehearsal periods, or you're in tech week or something, and you're just hanging around for hours, and it's fun. The bits where, you get to work with people, and when you're on stage and doing the fun bits is great. But the bits in between, sometimes it's just like, it's really boring, because you don't know if you have 5 minutes or if you have 2 hours before you're needed again. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if they had something in the same book that was sort of mindful, that they could just sit down and be like, I'm going to colour in some swirly bits, just, as my break in rehearsal. And then I'm going to come back on stage and it's low stress, but I'm also accidentally learning something while doing that. I don't know. I kind of like that idea.
Hey you! If you're enjoying the Singing Teachers Talk podcast, then don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We are committed to bringing you engaging conversations and valuable insights from experts across the field of voice. By subscribing, it means we can continue to do that. You'll never miss an episode, and you'll be helping to spread the word to other singing teachers, vocal coaches, and overall voice nerds. So subscribe to this channel now and just watch your teaching grow.
And did you have any feedback or any insight from teachers around you to say that this is something that they were, calling for?
Yeah, I think I had noticed people saying it. So people asked me from initially when I first started doing those weekly posts online, people did ask, do you sell posters, or do you sell your images, and, have you made a book or whatever? And it's sort of, they kept asking me, and I kept not having time to make the things that they were asking for. And I was always thinking in the background, I'd love to make a colouring book, because it's something that I would want. And then I noticed over the years, 1 or 2 people might ask in some of the forums, and they would say, I wonder, has anyone done a colouring book? And the thing is, people have done anatomy colouring books before. So there are some in existence. Some of the really big names in anatomy, they've done colouring books. And I looked at their colouring books and hated them so much, because it was like just a normal anatomy colouring book, except in like grayscale. And you would just like, ugh. And I looked at it and thought, but that's not what I'm imagining when I'm asking for a colouring book. And I thought, there's no point in sitting around waiting for someone else to do it. I might as well. So, once I had a little bit of time off, my friends will laugh at me a lot for this, but I think I had maybe a week and a half. And I thought, I'm going to take this week and a half. I'm not going to see any students. I'm not going to do any courses. I'm just going to sit home and I'm going to write this whole book in a week, because don't I have all of the images already, for the last 4 years of drawing? Surely it's not going to be that complicated. And yes, I did take a week and a half off. No, I did not complete the book in a week and a half. Absolutely not. But I got my contents page done and
Well,
a bit
congrats.
snowballed.
You had a Kickstarter funding process for this. So why was that implemented, and how did you go about setting that up?
Yeah, so Rosa Devine, who's the person who did the illustrations in the book that aren't the anatomy ones. So like, you know, the way there's even on the cover, there's like the swirly bits as well as the anatomy thing. So Rosa is the person that did all the swirly bits and all of the mindfulness. My hair is driving me nuts. Sorry, it's doing this big thing here. Sorry. She did all the swirly mindfulness bits, and she does that stage of book development where if somebody has written a book and finished a book and they send it off to editors and it's been edited and stuff, and then they send it off to somebody to put the book together and make it look like a real book. Rosa has done that for a number of people before. So I was asking her, she's a close friend of mine, so I asked her for, you know, advice on, listen, I want to do this book and it's been on my list for years and I just haven't been able to get around to it, and I want to do it now, but I know nothing about that process, and like, what about publishers, and what about this and what about that? And I had so many questions, and she was so very patient with me and so knowledgeable in an area I knew very little about. And when I threw the idea at her and I said, this is what I want to do, she said, it's going to be an unusual one to bring into a publisher. They're probably not going to be super keen to publish something like that because it's quite an expensive idea to have. Like, it's not like I didn't go for publishing, you know, a black and white thing, you know, with low quality paper that when you color it in, it comes through the other side. And, you know, I had this really clear idea. I said, I want people to be able to color it in. I don't want that to show through the paper. I want it to have color in it, but not be in color, so that it's not super boring to look at. So there's still some color on each page. I want to be able to tear out the back page to make paper larynx. I want to do all these things with it. Can I make that happen? And she basically said, yes, you can. But the only way that you should do this is if you launch it through Kickstarter, because it's such a risk if you're putting up loads and loads of money up front, and what if people don't want to buy it? So like, I will do this project with you, but let's do it through Kickstarter, because that way you don't take on the risk. And I thought that was a really sensible suggestion, and I don't know if people will like it, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I said it on social media, and that's because once you say it and once it's out there, then there's no going back. And it's quite terrifying, because the way Kickstarter works is either you raise the money and you get the money and you can follow through with it, or you don't meet your funding goal and you get no money.
Oh, so you don't even get what you actually have been pledged.
Absolutely not. So it's quite terrifying, because it is publicly, it's putting your head, you know, above the gauntlet and saying, hi, I'm here. I have this idea for a project, and if you believe in me and you believe I actually will deliver the project, and you believe it's a project worth investing in, then commit to give me the money. And the amount I really like, it's quite scary to do that. And everyone in the industry knows it's freaky to put yourself out there and be like, hey, do you want to support me in this thing? And then people did, which was so great. And the response was really good, and people from within the community were like, this is definitely a resource that we want. But the page in Kickstarter didn't have what the book was going to look like, because we couldn't make the book unless the Kickstarter worked. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. So I am unendingly grateful that I had enough people within the community from Instagram that have been following the posts for so many years, that they believed that I was going to make a quality product, that they believed I was trustworthy enough to actually finish the project and send it to them. And they're the reason that it happened. So I didn't go the old traditional route of going to a publisher and getting them to agree it was a good idea. Instead, I decided to go directly to the consumers and be like, hey, is this a thing you want? Because I think I can do this in a cool way. Do you believe me? And they were like, yeah, do it. So I did it. And it turned out better than some of them thought, which was really nice. I got a few messages from people being like, I didn't think it was going to be this nice, because it was a Kickstarter project and it's much higher quality than I thought it was going to be. I'm like, aha. I like that feedback.
Yeah, that's lovely. And such a good story for how being present on social media in certain ways can really pay off in the future for future projects, and this passive income that you might be getting now but then I want to ask you how you, if you're not going through a publisher, how you kind of produce the book yourself and ship it out.
Yeah, so we did with the Kickstarter. The Kickstarter, the point of that was to fund a first print of the book, in the way that we wanted the book to look like. So, in the future, if I was to do a reprint or if I, connect with a publisher or anything, I imagine these decisions will have to be made again. But for now, we did Kickstarter that did a limited print run, and I'm still making my way through that print run from the Kickstarter. So we have that. We have those books printed, still the original version of the book that everyone on Kickstarter got. And that's, at the moment, when people order it from me, it's directly from me, and I am making my way through that particular stock. And then once that's gone, I have to make a decision of what I do next. And I would then be self-funding it if I do a further print. So that's kind of thing. It's kind of slowly making my way through there. Have it printed. I ship it directly from here. So I ship across the globe, which has its upsides and its downsides, because downsides are, when folks who follow me from like Australia or somewhere order a book, like the shipping is expensive because I have to go from Ireland all the way to Australia. But the upside is everyone who has ordered a book from me gets a little handwritten note, which is probably the favorite part of my week, is when people order a book and I get to say, thank you for ordering this from me and not from, someone else. Like, it really is from me. I'm the person that packages it. I'm the person that sends it. And that part has been great because I get to see where they're going, when a book goes off to like Canada or like Tasmania or, Switzerland, and it's just it's just the best part of my week. That's so great. Future me, I have no idea what's in store. So there might be publishers, maybe, keep an eye, for future books and things, maybe. Might be doing it a bit differently. But we might do it through Kickstarter again, who knows?
Could we maybe have a little sneak peek at the book? Have you got a favourite page that you could share with us, or tell us what we can expect? You've told us a little bit about the repetition part of it and the larynx that you can make at the back of the page.
Oh, yeah.
Out.
That's an example of someone who has coloured in a page. So it's so it looks nicer than it being in black and white. And I think that's my favourite page. It's actually, we were talking about the lateral and the medial pterygoid stuff earlier on. I like this because it's so symmetrical. I don't know, there's something like really visually satisfying about it, which I like. But that's the idea of the kind of breakdown. Like, each page is going to have images that you can colour in, swirly bits that you can also colour in, which just makes everything look nicer, and then text and explanation. So I think sometimes, when I originally started and thought, I'm making this colouring book, it's like, oh, it's going to be just a colouring book. And I thought, well, but I want to add some information in there. So I thought, maybe I'll just add the information like I usually do in the bottom of my Instagram posts. And then I went back through them and realised I actually provide quite a lot of information in those captions, more than I thought I was. So, because when I put them in the book, it's got really texty. So then I had to edit out some of the text because it was too much information. So I've tried to strike a balance of, there is information about how everything works, but there's not so much information that it becomes sciencey and textbooky and boring. Yeah, the repetition ones are sort of, if I can give an idea, I have like Post-its on this. I don't know if that's really going to be quite distracting to look at, but so if you have like a page that has, let's say, larynxy things with labels, you will, a couple of pages later, also have one with no labels. So you have to remember them, and then you've got draw your own one. So you can't really see the lines, but there are like faded lines of the larynx there for you to draw
thank
on.
Goodness, yeah, because mine would come out looking like a pelican or something.
So would mine. So would mine, but I swear when you're digital drawing, things are a lot, things make a lot more sense for you. So it's kind of, yeah, and the larynx at the back, it does look a bit wild on the page, because people look at this and they're like, how is that a larynx? Where's it gone? Oh, I ripped it out of this one, so you can't see it. Oh, okay. Well, here it is when it's made.
Oh, yeah, great.
I can show you that. So it is paper. So bear in mind when you're working with paper, it is only paper, so it's a bit wiggly. But you have your epiglottis can move because it's sort of, again, Rosa, who is a paper engineering genius and sat patiently through me explaining how the larynx works, has made it so that can move. She's also made it, which is still baffling to me because I spent a really long time working on this with her, and I don't know how we managed to make it work, but the arytenoids also move. So like you can open them and close them. And those are the vocal folds, made out of folds of paper. And also this hinges. So like you can't, it's very hard to see that on camera, but
oh, great.
Right?
Yeah.
We're talking about like cricothyroid tilt or whatever you want to call it. It also does that. So it's cool. I really like it. It took a long time. I think my favorite part about that is probably that when we were trying to make a paper larynx that did these types of movements and something wasn't working, Rosa would say to me, this isn't like, I can't get it to move that way. Tell me about how it moves in the body. So tell me the bits that I'm missing. And I would talk through the muscles and the membranes that were there. And then she'd go, oh, well, that makes perfect sense, because if there was something there connecting these two parts, then that would move this way. Oh, from an engineering point of view, that makes a lot more sense. So like the more accurate that I got explaining how the anatomy worked, the easier it was for her to create that movement in paper, which I just thought was like really cool.
Yeah, so cool. Where can we actually get ourselves a copy, and how much do we need to save to afford ourselves one?
So they are only on sale through my website. So there's no way of getting them through any of the big other websites. It's just me. So it's vocology.ie. I think the link to the specific page on my website will be in the show notes from today, but it's in my shop on vocology.ie. The book is $24.99. That's in euros. So I don't know if because people might be listening from different countries, so I don't know what the exchange rate is at the moment in your countries. I'm sorry, but in euros, it's $24.99. And then the shipping varies depending on where you are. So if you're on the island of Ireland, it's obviously going to be cheaper than if you are on, in the UK somewhere, or in Europe, or if you're farther afield, in Australia or other places, it's a little bit more expensive. And I have had some people reach out and say that they've gotten together with a few of their pals and they've ordered like 5 books together or 10 books together so that they could have just like divide the shipping and stuff between them. So there's also that. But yes, save up, get one from the original maker of it. Yay.
You mentioned earlier that you had some ideas of how you might be able to include like anatomical directions and bits on the mapping in future. So without taking away the celebration of this book in the here and now and talking about what's next, I'm still going to ask you what's next. Do you have any plans? Is this book going to become a series? Have you got any other parts of the voice that you would want to tackle in a colouring book?
I have so many. I'm so pleasantly surprised with how many people asked me this immediately as I published the first one. But they said, this is so great, I want more, give me more right now. It's like, okay, that's a wonderful response, because it tells me that there is an audience out there for this kind of learning and for this way of doing it. So it makes me want to make more books. I think the answer to, is there something that I'd love to include? Absolutely, because you can only fit so much in. I had all these ideas of how much I would include in there. But for example, I didn't have any space to include the muscles of like respiration, with the exception of the diaphragm, which I did put in. But other things, like there's no picture in there of lungs, there's no intercostals, transverse abdominis, like there's no other muscles to do with respiration there. So I'd love to do them in a follow-on book. I would love to do the kind of anatomical terms in a fun way. I haven't quite figured out my way in there yet. There's been a lot of trial and error with this particular thing, but I'll keep going because I know I'll crack it eventually. So my plan is that it would be a series of some sort. I hope. I don't know how many books there is in that series. We shall see. But yes, I don't have a date. I don't have a timeline yet for when that is going to happen. But yes, I think there are more books in me for this, more colouring books. Definitely more colouring books. Maybe there's another type of book in me in future. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, well, it's really a big congratulations on it. It looks beautiful. And as I told you before, it's on my birthday list. So I just want to pass on my congrats.
Thank you.
Eimear, it's been so fun to chat with you. Can you tell us again where we can find out more about you?
You can find out about me on my website, vocology.ie, or follow me on Instagram, because I am there probably more often than I should be. And that's at Vocology Ireland. Pop in, say hello, pop by on Mondays, where I try to put up my Anata Monday posts. Although, with all the madness of this book, that has slowed down recently because I'm trying to fit everything into my rather saturated schedule, but I will do my best. Sometimes I do silly little quizzes in my stories, which are quite fun. They're not meant to be taken very seriously. Sometimes I get very panicked DMs from vocal coaches being like, I tapped too quickly through your quiz and I said the wrong answer, but I know the right answer.
Oh, bless us. We bless us, always trying to prove that we should be what we are.
I know. So pop by, follow, do the quizzes. They're good fun. Say hello, send me a message if you got one of my books and tell me if you're enjoying it. And if there's something missing from it that you'd love to be in the next book, let me know.
And what program do you use to do the digital drawing?
I was using, not gonna lie, about 4 years ago when I started this, I was using a free software called, what was it called? Medabang Paint, I think is what it was called. I have told people this on Instagram before who've reached out to me and asked me how I was doing it so that they could do them themselves. And without fail, every person that I said this to sent me another DM about 2 days later going, I don't know how you're doing this. This is insane. I can't use this program. I don't know. I had nothing else to do. It was COVID. Come on. We all picked up weird hobbies. Mine was this one. So yeah, that's what I used. And then Rosa obviously used different software when she was putting it together in the book, but I don't understand how to use that, so I can't really talk about it. But
well, can I float an idea out for you, Eimear?
Yes.
To actually change the way you have family games is a digital version of Pictionary.
Oh goodness. Oh, interesting. Oh, that would be fun. That'd be definitely very different. Although I will say it does take me a very long time still.
It would be like an hour on the timer.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Everyone can just have a sherry or two in between.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, Eimear, it's been a real pleasure to chat with you. Thanks so much. And good luck with the book. I will absolutely give you a DM and mention when I get mine because I'm, manifesting it through my birthday. Thank you so much, Eimear.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.